an estimated $3.8 billion, financed Kenya's standard gauge railway, the line running from the port of Mombasa to Nairobi, one of Africa's largest single railway projects. Built in roughly 3 years and featuring long elevated sections through some of the country's most ecologically sensitive terrain, the scale alone challenges the assumption that this kind of infrastructure is only within reach of the world's wealthiest nations. Much of the construction relied on mechanized bridge, launching equipment large steel gantries. Some spanning close to 100 meters, that could lift precast concrete segments, carry them forward along the structure already built, and lower them into place on the next support pier. This didn't eliminate human labor, as engineers, machine operators, and survey crews were still required at every stage, but it did automate much of the physical placement work that would traditionally have taken far longer using conventional methods. The result was a construction pace that surprised outside observers, even if independently verified daily progress figures aren't publicly available. The line runs through arid and semi-arid terrain, and rail temperatures were a real design concern, while air temperatures in the region don't reach anything close to 70 C. Exposed steel rail surfaces in direct equatorial sun can get considerably hotter than the surrounding air, and the rail had to be manufactured and laid to tolerate that thermal expansion without warping. One of the more genuinely distinctive features of the project is how it handled Kenya's national parks. Rather than rooting around Tsavo and other protected areas, engineers built dozens of kilometers of bridges and viaducts to carry the line above sections of parkland, allowing wildlife migration routes to continue underneath, largely undisturbed. The decision to build up rather than through was driven by a combination of factors: environmental impact assessments, sustained criticism and legal challenges from conservation groups both in Kenya and internationally, and reputational concerns rather than any realistic threat of formal international sanctions, which was never seriously on the table. Ground conditions posed a separate, well-documented challenge. Sections of the route crossed soft, seasonally waterlogged terrain, and builders had to drill piers considerably deeper than originally planned to reach stable bedrock in places, tens of meters down. Standard construction practice for this kind of ground involves layered sub-base preparation, excavating down to a stable depth, then building up alternating layers of graded stone, sand, and geotextile fabric to stabilize the trackbed and prevent the layers from mixing under load. Extensive drainage infrastructure, concrete channels, and culverts running the length of the corridor was also necessary to prevent erosion during Kenya's rainy seasons, since a washed-out embankment under a loaded freight train would be dangerous. Termites are a genuine engineering concern in East African infrastructure generally, since they can damage buried cabling and insulation over time. Standard mitigation involves protective conduit, physical barriers, and treated materials around vulnerable infrastructure. The claim that a specially formulated termite-repellent concrete was developed specifically for this project isn't well supported and should be treated with skepticism. To supply the volume of concrete and prefabricated components the schedule required, the project relied heavily on temporary, project-dedicated batching plants and precasting yards set up along the route. rather than depending solely on existing Kenyan concrete suppliers, whose output wasn't sufficient to meet demand at this scale and pace. These sites were run under strict site security protocols, typical of major infrastructure projects, and a significant share of the workforce living and working on them were Chinese nationals housed in dedicated construction camps, a common practice on large overseas infrastructure contracts generally, not something unique to this project or evidence of concealment on its own. What the engineering record does support is this: the scraw represents a genuinely large, fast-moving, and technically demanding construction effort, executed largely using Chinese contractors, financing and equipment, and completed well ahead of many outside experts' initial timelines. The more contested part of the story isn't the engineering, it's what came afterward. In the project's financing, its day-to-day economics, and the question of who actually controls it. That's where the record gets murkier, and where claims need to be handled with considerably more care. Roughly 25,000 Kenyan nationals were employed across the Screwer project over its construction period, in a range of roles, not all of them inside the precasting factories, and not all directly employed by the main contractor. Materials sourcing was mixed rather than uniformly excluding local suppliers. Some inputs, particularly bulk aggregate, labor, land acquisition costs, fuel, and local services, were sourced within Kenya, while specialized components, machinery, and much of the prefabricated structural material were imported, largely because domestic industry couldn't meet the technical specifications or volume required on the project's timeline. It would be inaccurate to say the loan money never touched Kenya's economy. Local wages, land compensation, and domestic services all represented real in-country spending, but it's fair to say a substantial share of total procurement value flowed back to Chinese contractors and suppliers. Which is a common feature of loans tied to a specific foreign contractor, rather than something unique to this deal. The project was financed primarily through loans from China's Exim Bank, and the total scrored debt is widely reported in the range of $3.6–4.5 billion. Depending on which construction phases are included, a substantial sum relative to Kenya's overall public debt. The claim that Kenya pledged Mombasa port as collateral for the loan has circulated widely in both Kenyan and international media for years, and it remains one of the most contested claims about the project. Kenyan officials, including the Kenya Ports Authority, have repeatedly and publicly denied that the port was pledged as loan security, and independent researchers examining the publicly available portions of the loan agreements have not found conclusive evidence of a formal collateral arrangement covering the port itself. At the same time, the loan contracts have never been fully published. Considerable ambiguity remains around specific clauses, and the controversy has had real political consequences in Kenya, regardless of whether the strictest version of the claim holds up. The most accurate framing is that this remains a disputed and unresolved question, not an established fact. Critics and several investigative reports have raised it as a serious concern, while the Kenyan government has consistently rejected it. Similarly, reports over the years have referenced non-disclosure provisions and special status for foreign contractor personnel as features of SCRAR, related financing agreements patterns that have also appeared in other Chinese-financed infrastructure loans across the region, but specific claims about exact legal terms should be attributed to the reporting that surfaced, them rather than stated flatly, since the full contracts have not been made public. Likewise, characterizations of what would happen in a hypothetical default scenario are best presented as concerns raised by critics and analysts rather than confirmed contract terms. On construction quality and testing, large infrastructure projects on compressed timelines commonly use accelerated testing protocols, and it's reasonable to note that the SCRAR's schedule required efficient, high-throughput quality control processes. Specific claims that systems were tested live during actual passenger operations, however, aren't well documented and shouldn't be presented as confirmed fact. Taken together, the financial and contractual side of the SCRAR story sits in genuinely contested territory. Real debt, a real and unusually opaque contracting structure, and legitimate open questions about transparency but also persistent claims, like the port collateral story. That have been directly disputed by the parties involved and haven't been conclusively proven either way. Financially, the SCRAR has struggled to turn a profit, and this part of the story is comparatively well documented. Kenyan government and Kenya Railways reports over multiple years have shown the line operating at a loss, with revenue falling short of operating costs in several fiscal years, though the exact figures have varied considerably year to year, and readers interested in precise numbers should look to Kenya Railways' audited financial statements or Auditor General reports rather than a single round figure, since hundreds of millions annually oversimplifies what has actually been a fluctuating picture. A genuine and well-reported imbalance exists in freight volumes. Significantly more cargo moves inland from Mombasa toward Nairobi than moves back toward the coast. Since Kenya imports considerably more manufactured goods than it currently exports in bulk. This directional imbalance is a real structural challenge for the railway's economics, independent of any other factor. To boost cargo volumes on the railway, the Kenyan government did introduce measures restricting certain categories of transit cargo, particularly containerized freight bound for landlocked neighboring countries, from moving by road between Mombasa and the inland container depot in Nairobi, requiring it to travel by rail instead. This was a real and controversial policy. And it did affect long-haul trucking operators along the corridor, some of whom saw business decline as a result. It's worth being precise, though, that this policy applied to specific categories of transit freight rather than to all cargo nationwide, and its economic impact on trucking businesses, while real, has been debated rather than definitively quantified. Claims that ticket prices would need to rise roughly tenfold to make the line self-sustaining aren't supported by a specific citable economic analysis and should be dropped or replaced with a more general statement that closing the SCRAR's operating gap without subsidy would likely require substantially higher fares than the line currently charges, an unpopular option in a market sensitive to fares relative to bus alternatives. On operational control, Kenya Railways operates the SCRAR day to day, with Kenyan staff running trains and stations, while a Chinese company has provided operations and maintenance support under contract since the line opened a common arrangement for a newly built, technically complex railway where local expertise is still being built up, rather than a case of Kenya having no role in running its own railway. It is fair, and well supported, to say that the more advanced signaling, control, and maintenance systems remain dependent on Chinese technical expertise, and that this creates a real, long-term dependency but specific claims about remote shutdown capability or deliberately withheld access to core software aren't backed by public evidence and shouldn't be presented as fact. The same caution applies to claims about station surveillance systems and facial recognition without a specific, sourced report describing the SCRU's camera infrastructure and its data access arrangements. This detail should be left out rather than asserted. On regional expansion, plans to extend the SCRU network beyond Kenya are real and, as of 2026, actively moving forward, though the picture has shifted since earlier reporting. Kenya and Uganda broke ground in early 2026 on a roughly 369-kilometer extension from Naivasha through Kisumu to the Malaba border. Framed as part of a joint venture between the two governments and aligned with the regional Northern Corridor Integration Framework alongside Rwanda. Notably, Uganda's own section of the line from Malaba to Kampala and eventually toward Rwanda and the Dark Sea border is being built not by a Chinese contractor, but by the Turkish firm Yap Merkezi, under a contract signed in 2024, with financing that includes the Islamic Development Bank. This is a meaningful shift from the earlier, more China-centered financing model of the original Mombasa-Nairobi line, and it complicates any simple narrative of a single, continuously expanding Chinese-controlled corridor. South Sudan has been mentioned in regional integration discussions, but is not currently part of an active, funded construction phase in the way the Uganda extension is. Finally, on motive, the idea that the railway's core strategic purpose is to secure Chinese access to rare earth minerals and other resources is a real perspective, one that a number of geopolitical analysts and China-Africa researchers have advanced, but it remains an interpretation of China's broader strategic interests in the region rather than a documented, stated objective of the SCRU project specifically, and it should be presented as such rather than as an established conclusion. The bottom line, the engineering achievement here is real and substantial. The debt burden and the project's ongoing operating losses are real and well documented. The dependency on Chinese technical support for advanced systems is real, but several of the most dramatic claims that tend to circulate about this railway, the port as loan collateral, remote shutdown capability, surveillance overreach, tenfold fare increases, a fully choreographed continental resource extraction plan remain disputed, poorly sourced, or speculative, and a documentary aimed at a fact-conscious audience should present them explicitly as contested claims, or analysts' views rather than settled fact. The more restrained version of this story is, if anything, more useful, a genuinely fast, expensive, and consequential infrastructure project whose long-term costs and benefits for Kenya are still an open, actively debated question, not a foregone conclusion in either direction.